Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, What Tech Should Stay with the New Normal. My name is Kevin Hogan. I'm editor-at-large at eSchool News, and I'll be moderating this event. I'm excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's webinar is sponsored by Stride Learning Solutions. Since 2000, Stride has been a leader in strategic solutions to solve district challenges. Their flexible online and blended learning options boost modern instruction and promote lifelong student success. With an innovative platform, comprehensive digital courseware, adaptable technology, and extensive support, Stride is equipped to help your school or district empower a brighter future for learners. Now, before I introduce our presenters, I'd like to take a minute or two to go over some features of the platform that we're using for this webinar. Hopefully, we're all pretty used to Zoom by now, but I'll go through it anyway. Today's event is going to be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. There will be a time at the end of the presentation for our speakers to address those questions. There is also a chat function that you can launch by clicking on it. Feel free to use this to contact someone from eSchool News if you have a technical question, but please don't use that feature to ask questions of the speakers. If you have a question, just use that Q&A box that I just mentioned. Closed captioning is also available by clicking on the CC. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, I'd like to get started. Actually, Chris, if you could launch our poll questions so we can get a little bit more information from our audience and the reasons that they're here. If you could pull up that first. So everybody who's out there, what school level are you serving? Is it the elementary, middle, high school, or is it kind of an overall of the district from soup to nuts? We'll give you a couple minutes to answer that question. I know in my conversations over the past year, there are certainly many different types of needs and solutions depending on the age groups that we're talking about. So we'll see if we have the answers to that one. Okay, so great, because I think each of our speakers has experience at all those levels, but obviously then the K-12 seems to be the number one. So Chris, launch the other poll and see what sort of information we can get out from the other folks who are online. Describe your school's experience with last year's shift to remote learning. Extremely disruptive. Student learning continued in spite of the challenges. Many students thrive learning online. I guess it could be a little bit of each. I don't see an option for everyone that says it went great and it was really easy. It was certainly a tough time, as our speakers will let us know. So Chris, what do you have there for those results? Yeah, well, that's really great news. And I think more and more as we kind of come out of this cloud of the madness, we're going to find that. I mean, the people last spring were upset with some of the districts had a lack of connectivity. It was a really tough time, and even going over the course of this year. But more and more, and this is what I hope the crux of our conversation is about, we're learning that there were some techniques, there were some innovations that came out of this. I call it the greatest beta test in ed tech history, right? We finally had all these tools at hand that we're able to use and apply. And you know what? I think the glass is going to be half full when we kind of come out of this. So with that, I know you didn't come here to listen to me talk. Let's get right to our panelists. We have a big whole number of folks here to get through. Maybe first I'll ask, well, let's start with Frank. Frank, can you give us a little bit of an introduction to you and your district?
Sure. My name's Frank Calero. I'm the supervisor of technology for the Linwood Public Schools in southern New Jersey. We're a pre-K to 8 district with about 835 students we serve.
Great. And Stacy, how about you? Give us a little bit of your background.
I am a fifth grade teacher at Alabama Virtual Academy, which is an online public school powered by Stride, and I'm getting ready to start my third year with fifth grade at Alva.
Very good. Well, thank you for being here. And Kristen, how about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I am Kristen Haberster. I'm lead teacher at Digital Academy of Florida. We are also a public school. We partner with the Hendry County School District in Florida. And I just am thrilled to be here and contribute to the conversation today. So look forward to our conversation.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Brittany.
Hey everybody, I'm Brittany Churchill. I'm the production specialist at the Office of Teaching and Learning here at Stride. But my passion is in the classroom and supporting teachers in finding unique ways and innovative ways to meet all learners, whether that be in the online environment or in the traditional school. So it really all comes together, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with this group of people today.
Well, that's great. And thanks everybody for joining us. I think your insights are going to be really valuable for our audience, but let's get right into it. I know I'm certainly sick of talking about it, but the pandemic unfortunately still has some context to the way that we live and the way that you work and educate. Maybe we'll start off, if everybody can just give us a little, the cocktail party answer of, where were you on March 13th, right? When everything just went downhill. I think for many districts and schools, it was right before spring break. They started handing out laptops like chiclets, even to their younger students, that maybe that they didn't have a device strategy before that morning, and then it became one. Let's talk a little bit about the day in that life. Frank, I know we've spoken about it before. So in your position as tech director, I think you might have an even more of a unique perspective from the K-12 angle.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. We all try to plan out, you get like a 5-year plan. Well, our 5-year plan came together in a week. So, we planned on going 1-to-1, mostly with our middle school. We went 1-to-1 K-8. We had to look at what technologies we had that we could use and what technologies we needed. And what we tried to do is we let the teachers try to inform what are some of the tools they're already using and some tools we could use to help supplement what they need to do. And I think it was really important to have that sort of needs assessment to say, okay, we're talking from, pre-K to 8, teaching is a lot different from grade to grade. So some teachers needed more or less, math teachers wanted certain things opposed to language arts teachers, opposed to elementary school teachers. So we try to build a toolkit by, getting feedback from the teachers, because, at first everything happened so fast. We were literally, fortunately, we're not a very large school district. We were driving around delivering Chromebooks to kids, over a weekend. So that was that actually, we knew what we had to do there. But then when it came to the actual teaching part, we had to go out and figure out what toolkit did we want to put together and look for districts that are already doing it. Fortunately, I reached out to some of the network I have, and I'm like, okay, cold climate places, because they have no snow days, they go virtual days, they've already done some of this. So I reached out to some people like in Wisconsin and Chicago and so forth and say, what are you guys doing? And we were able to kind of put something together that really worked and something we could sustain, because we didn't know how long this was going to last, right? And something that was as least stressful for everyone. You're talking about the kids, the parents, the teachers, everybody, even down the administration, because it was, I'm sure you guys all agree, it was pretty hectic in the beginning.
Yeah. Now, Kristen and Stacy, you both work in remote environments, even BP, before the pandemic. But I'll assume that some dynamics changed from your experiences as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? We'll start with Kristen.
Right. It did change. I think when the pandemic hit and we knew that we would be jumping in and helping students transition to the virtual environment, which many of them were not used to. It was a change for all of us too. So we were handling a much larger crowd than we normally, have of student onboarding and things like that. So it was a little bit of a rush for us as well, even though we have all of that experience and successfully educating students online. It was such an enormous amount of students that came on all at once.
Yeah.
We were hiring and trying to make that transition as easy as possible for our teachers and our students and our learning coaches. So it was an adjustment. It was an opportunity for growth for sure, even for our schools.
Yeah. And how about from the teacher perspective, Stacy? I mean, what was the day-to-day change like?
It's funny because I don't think our world really changed right away when everybody else's was changing. I think the biggest thing for me as a teacher in that spring when everything first shut down was all my brick and mortar teacher friends reaching out to me like, what do I do? But then, like Kristen said, in the fall, all of a sudden we have all these kids coming in that have never been virtual before. And so, onboarding them, helping them, switch to this environment, helping their families, understand their end of things. And then also, again, like Kristen said, we hired a bunch of new teachers. We had to have teachers for all these new students that were coming in. And so a lot of us as teachers took on the role of mentoring those teachers and bringing them in and helping them make that transition as well. So I think for us, the big change really happened that next fall.
Yeah. Yeah. And Brittany, from Stride side, you have districts and schools who are like Frank in person. You have a little bit of a hybrid, and you obviously have the virtual as well. Talk a little bit about, I keep calling it the BP, but before the pandemic versus now during the pandemic. Have there been pivots in the way that you are providing products and services for districts as a result of this?
100%. So one of the things that when I think about this, to name a dynamic shift was the lack of choice that all of a sudden happened to our nation as a whole. We have been often a choice, right, for our students and families to decipher for themselves that this is a choice that they would like to make. And historically, our learning coaches had made that choice. So they knew what they were getting into, right? They knew that they'd be a support to their student. We had very clear, defined expectations across the board, but that dynamic changed when that choice went away and families no longer had the choice to be in a physical school space. We all needed to be separated from each other during this pandemic. That put a lot of pressure on our teachers with children, our staff members with children, and our families with other children, and making sure that they're still moving forward in their educational and social path during this pandemic, which naming that social element is so complicated because I know for example, turned into a robot. I no longer knew how to socialize, which is something I'm typically very comfortable with, but I can only imagine what that felt like for our families and students, and for our families that had other students, and they no longer had a choice. They had to do this to ensure that they were continuing with education and making sure that their students, their learners were having consistent growth patterns during this crazy pandemic year. But one of the things that I think we started to think about was, yes, there is a physical learning space. Yes, there's virtual online spaces. Why are we drawing boundaries between them? Why are we saying that one cannot look like the other? And what we've been trying to empower is a mindset where we take what we did well. Most of our teachers, if not all, have taught in the physical learning space and taught well. And so taking some of those strategies that worked well in that space and figuring out how to boost our technology as well. to go alongside the teacher and supplement the teacher to support the students. So not only have we started to think about tearing down those silos of thinking about physical space or lack of physical space and continuing to teach and implement best practice like we did wherever we were in our teaching career before we became online educators, but also simultaneously thinking about technology from the teacher perspective. What will a teacher need to be able to do this more efficiently so they can focus on adding in those social sessions with their students? And we're seeing that consistently with the use of the Teacher Hub, which is a new implementation this year. The Teacher Hub will allow us to share resources with each other, as well as Stride Skills Arcade, where we can have students work independently on the Stride Skills Arcade, look at reports and gain resources to supplement that student's learning based on work that they did independently. So those are some shifts that I can definitely name, is taking away those silos of that physical space and figuring out ways that we can implement those best practices anywhere, but also supporting our teachers and staff and learners by creating technology or replicating or developing and partnering with different technology companies to make those things that were stopping us from being able to do the things that we did so well and that worked so well in the traditional classroom, to be able to do them in an online environment.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things in the conversations I've been having, obviously everyone's always focused on the kids first, on the students first, and we had these sort of conversations. But the reality is, for any of these tools to work, for any of these innovations to stick around, it has to be the professionals. It has to be the educators who first accept it, and then adopt it, and then change it to the way they want to use it, right? And Brittany, you mentioned before, whether you like it or not. I've been writing about ed tech for a long time. Lots of stories about teachers that were called thwatties. That's the way we always did it. And I don't need this new stuff in order to do what I've done for 25 years, especially if I'm teaching calculus, or even with the younger grades, the K-5. It's like, I don't need this stuff. I had the kids in front of me. I know each one of them like my own child. I'm an artist. I'm not an accountant. Don't give me this data. Well, whether you liked it or not, you were using this stuff starting of March of last year. Maybe each of you, I know we can open this up too. You can unmute yourselves. So we can just make this like a regular Zoom call. But like, what were your experiences when it came to professional development? Another great kind of myth before the pandemic was that there was the teacher resistance to technology that I just mentioned, because there was a fear of technology replacing what they do. And there was also a perception of teachers, that was much different than now. Everyone understands and appreciates the heroism of their everyday work, let alone there being a pandemic. So I'll just open up and ask each of you to talk about the changes of behaviors with your faculty. And Stacy, as a faculty member yourself, how maybe you've seen the changes in some of your colleagues when it comes to using these technologies. And then finally, do you see these new behaviors sticking when it comes to this September? And maybe, Kristen, I'll start off with you with that.
Yeah, I definitely think that, professional development was very important to our teachers this year. Many of them were not familiar with the platforms, how to engage students in online learning, and keep them engaged and teach them how to collaborate with one another. So we did a lot of PDs at the beginning of the year just on engaging that student in virtual learning, making sure that they were coming to class, wanting to be there, being involved, collaborating with each other, using breakout rooms and other video communication platforms on, getting them to talk with one another. So that was really important. That took some time, to do. But from our perspective, the teachers seemed very excited who were coming into virtual learning. We felt like their mindset was there. They were ready to jump in. They understood that our world was changing and, that we needed to make this change to educate our students and to get that, student academic growth. So for the most part at our school, we had, we didn't really have any educators that were resistant. They were more open to learning. How do I do what I can do in the classroom and make it just as effective in the online environment?
Yeah. Now, Frank, I know you I mean your district is very progressive, and I know that the folks that work with you and for you, drank the Kool-Aid on the benefits of technology a long time ago. But talk a little bit about some of those behaviors during this time.
Sure. So, one of the first things we did is we knew this was going to be like, here it comes. You can't stop it. It's going to hit you. So we try to lessen the blow a little. We actually, when we were handing out, we knew we were going to go all virtual. So we actually kind of flipped the script a little bit. We went old school and we gave the kids some packets, like paper packets that said, look, this is this week's work. We want you to do it. Don't spend more than X number of hours a day or a week on it. Put it aside, go outside and play. We're going to get our plan together. So, we the teachers put stuff together. We got it out to them. We got the message out to the parents. That bought us a little bit of that time, gave the teachers a little less pressure. So we got that together. And then what we did is we formulated our plan with our staff and all, and we knew we had to do PD. So once we built that toolkit, different people jumped in. Like I built a website for our teachers that they could jump in based on the tools that we had. And I was making screencasts and videos and giving them links to places, and someone was doing it better. I said, just go watch this one or do that. And then we would have follow-up meetings with them because we all know PD is nothing without follow-up. So we did follow-up meetings with them online. And, we just kept building it. And then we did a parent academy type thing. Say, these are the tools your kids are going to be using. You don't need to know how to use everything, but you need to understand the whole path of it, how we plan on using it, what they're going to do with it. So we did that with them. The kids kind of didn't have too many problems. They were pretty good. They're not afraid. I mean, I always tell people the difference between someone says they're techie or not techie is the willingness to just push that button. Just try. If you mess up, you try again. So we try to couch it to them. Look, we're all going to have challenges. Bandwidth's going to be a problem. Someone's not going to be able to get online. Just, we're going to give it our best effort, and we're going to be here to support you. And that was the biggest thing. Say, look, I mean, obviously I'm not teaching anymore, but I'm always there. Like, contact me. I started office hours. We could jump in, we can trade things. And then one really neat thing we did is that in our area, and it actually started to build out to actually nationally, a local superintendent started a small group of people. Just every week we'd get together and talk, and we'd share things. And then it ended up, we had people from the state Department of Education. We had a professor join us, and it started to build out, and then we were able to invite people from other states to share their experiences. So that was a really positive thing that came out of this. The sharing just exploded.
Yeah. And do you think that will stick around? I mean, do you think you're going to have a monthly Zoom call with that same group, or will it get bigger, or do you hope it will at least?
Yeah, I hope it'll continue. We still stay in touch, and we still have meetings. They become a little more localized, and now everything got a little crazy with coming back to school and restarting. I think we'll still do it. I think there's a little lull right now, but I think it'll ramp back up especially now, because these technologies, a lot of people are realizing, hey, I can just jump on a video call with Kevin and bounce something off.
Yeah. And, that's another aspect of this disruption that I've discovered is the involvement of parents. As a parent myself of 3 students, I've spoken more to my kids' teachers than I have this past year than the 15 years that I've been talking to teachers, right? And it's been different. It's been more empathetic than maybe some of the power dynamics that you would have before. Probably my own history of being, sent to the principal's office, maybe that rears some things up. But even in a remote setup, I guess, Stacy, you were communicating with parents remotely before, but now those parents have really become teaching assistants, I guess, right? For a certain degree. Talk a little bit about your experiences in the change of the dynamic through the use of these synchronous platforms.
Right. Yeah. And well, and so I'll start out by saying when I first came to virtual, and I tell this story all the time, one of my biggest fears was how do I form relationships on a computer? But what I found is that because I'm calling these we call them learning coaches at our school, because sometimes it's not parents, sometimes it's aunts, uncles, grandparents. So we use that term so it encompasses whoever's helping them. But because I'm calling them on the phone, I found that not only do I have strong relationships with these kids, but I also have strong relationships with these learning coaches, the person that's helping them every day. So like Brittany mentioned earlier, before the pandemic, all of our students and learning coaches that came to our school, they knew what they were getting into. They did their research, they made this choice. And while our parents that came during the pandemic, of course, did their research and made a choice between, what their school was offering maybe or coming to our school, it's not quite the same because you're still kind of pressured to make that choice, right? So I think that I spent a lot more time on the phone and in Zoom with learning coaches this year than I even normally would, because I'm teaching these learning coaches because it's elementary, so they're not high schoolers that can get on there and just figure it out. So I spent a lot of time in Zoom, screen sharing, showing how to do things, and talking on the phone, talking them through things, how do different things work. So, and I think, communication is a huge part of what makes virtual work, because those learning coaches do play such a big role that as teachers, we have to communicate with them and help them through those challenges. Especially, fifth grade math, I've got a lot of learning coaches that are like, I haven't looked at this since I was in the fifth grade, and now I'm having to help them, on the side. So we did a lot of teaching learning coaches too. And, just like I said, spending more time with them maybe than we normally would in the past, because they were more pressured into this decision than it being something they've done.
Sure. And Kristen, talk a little bit about the younger grades and the dynamics of having a remote setup. A lot of the traditional press has discovered remote learning all of a sudden. There still seems to be a lot of skepticism about, the younger the student, the more important it is to be in an in-person experience versus remote. But again, some of the data that's coming out is saying that depending on the student, that many are thriving in this sort of circumstance. Can you talk a little bit about your own experiences in that regard?
Sure. I am a previous kindergarten teacher, so I am used to dealing with the littles. I love them. I have a passion for early childhood. I think it is so important to teach the teacher. So one of the things that I noticed when I was in the classroom is developing, those relationships. Just like Stacy said, it was key to my students' success. The other thing is helping them, right? Most parents don't have the background and education to teach foundational reading skills and, do some of the other things that we as teachers and educators do on a daily basis. So what I found is the more support that we could give them, especially in those younger grades, the better the relationships were and the better the student growth was. So it all relates to one another. And I think that is really key, is when you are dealing with primary students, getting that learning coach buy-in, right? So really helping that learning coach to understand the importance of what it is their student is learning, the why behind it, and then encouraging them, as their teacher as well, almost like a partnership in teaching is what I would, call it, with the teacher, the online instructor, and the learning coach, the parent at home. So that partnership, just like Stacy said, is absolutely critical in making those younger learners successful.
Right. So Brittany, maybe you could talk a little bit from the industry side and Stride side about this, what I assume is this new customer or an expansion or a new thinking of the customer, which is the parent / teaching assistant that kind of came on the scene last April. Were there any changes in the platform or the approaches in which you construct your technology?
Yes. this has been a huge focus for us, because what we discovered was not necessarily that we needed to home what we did for the learning coaches that were involved. We needed to build structures and strategies for learning coaches that could not be. Because in many scenarios, the learning coach is home, but they have 3 or 4 students all working online with different teachers, working on different learning opportunities, and they could not home in just on one student. And so we have really taken a step back and thought about, okay, how can we create a pathway for both? For students that maybe would work more independently with less learning coach support, from a teacher perspective, those would be my high flyers, my students that could go above and beyond and don't need as much guided support, and also don't have as much support at home, but they don't need it if we structure well. But there are also those students that really need that relationship with their teacher. There are those students that really need that partnership, and they need it all happening simultaneously throughout the school day. So what we've been working on developing is those 2 different pathways. And right now it's only 2. I am sure we will find many more pathways as we learn and grow and strategize and pivot to ensure that we're truly reaching all learners. But what we've gained insight-wise from this pandemic year is that we need to offer a more independent path as an option as well, to be able to differentiate in conjunction or in, simultaneously with students going to live classes. We've also realized that because we are asking teachers to differentiate for the many different levels of students, we need to provide training and resources to supplement and support that. So we've taken a huge step back to say, okay, this is the way we structured, strategized, and did things over the last 20 years of K-12 Stride's existence. We need to take a step back and look at our main goal, which is our students, and find ways to reach all of them. Now, we know that the most powerful tool is our teachers. We will never replace our teachers with technology.
Yeah,
no.
that myth is busted forever. Yeah.
Because I study this and I do not see that as a possibility. But what I do see is some relief on the teachers with their large class sizes to be able to take a more independent path with less support. And so what we're developing now are some lessons that students can follow with interaction, to where we can pull reporting on how students are doing more independently and know that they're being taught the same lesson that we're teaching in the live classroom. And then providing those structures for teachers, but saying, you are the expert. Use what you want, lose what you don't. And so that our teachers still are really the experts in the pedagogy that they're utilizing, but they have supplemental material to say, here is something we know works. Use it if you think it will be beneficial. And so we're supplementing to create more independent pathways, but also to support our teachers without saying, you must do blank to be successful. Saying, you can use this if you'd like to, but we know you are the expert and we trust your insight and expertise to move all of these students forward. But we want to give you supports if they're needed, where they're needed, and be able to move students forward with many different pathways. And that's just speaking specifically to K-1. When we talk about the pathways for our older students, there are lots of possibilities as we go up into the grade levels with our new partnerships with Tech Elevator, with MedCert, giving students opportunity to walk away from high school with a medical certification that will bring them right into a field of choice, and really moving ourselves from thinking about to and through college, one pathway, to saying, no, we want to meet all learners and get them to where they have opportunity for a choice-filled life versus there is one pathway and it's all academics. We're really thinking about how we can reach every learner, not just through the academic pipeline, but instead to a choice-filled life.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So far we've kind of been focused on the synchronous aspects of our experiences through the pandemic. And while I didn't hear any of you guys, whether you're in person or remote, suggest that 8-hour Zoom classrooms continue, or even 4 hours or even 1 hour. However, my takeaway, and you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you agree or disagree, that to some degrees, this platform, where we're talking about Zoom or whatever, your synchronous communications when it comes to parent-teacher communication, administrator to administrator communications, from my perspective, parent-teacher meetings and school board meetings, maybe all have this sort of element that remains when we go back to the new normal. Give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Frank, yeah, yes, okay, good. So, all right, well, I think that's one big question that we had at the beginning of the webinar that we've solved, so we'll make it be. But now, as we move along, and Brittany was starting to touch on it a little bit, and I think these elements of learning going forward are going to be even more important. It's the asynchronous aspects of using these tools. And I know that Stacy and Kristen, you've been involved with them. Frank, you've been involved with them to a certain degree. Let's talk about some of the things that you used last spring that maybe you didn't use before, and you've kind of had an aha moment and said, well, wow, we should have been doing it this way all along. Let's see, Stacy, let's start with you.
So on our platform, the students, they do have lessons that they complete independently, and then they come to class with me. They all have different schedules because, and I know Kristen's school does the same way. We do small groups. So we have small groups at different times. Everybody has their own schedule. I think, one of the things that we took advantage of really at our school is using the digital platforms for the students to provide feedback to each other, was something we really focused on. This last year, we had a good range of students because we had so many that it was really beneficial to give them more of those opportunities to do that. And with digital, it's very easy to we talked about the My Favorite No, if you've never heard of that. It's really awesome, picking your favorite wrong answer. In digital, it's really easy to do that. You crop it, take their name off, put it up, talk about it. And so, there's some, like I said, our teaching world didn't change a whole lot as far as the asynchronous and synchronous instruction. We kind of did our same thing, but there were things that, we said, okay, well, how do we make it even better? How do we expand on that? And that's one of my favorite things from this past year, was using technology to really make it easier for them to give that feedback to each other. Like I said, it's so easy to take their name off. So you're anonymously allowing them to say, hey, I like how you did this. What if you tried this next time? How did you get that? And really allowing them to work through the foundations of what they're learning, while also, allowing them to expand on that growth mindset as well. By the end of the year, my kids were like cheering each other on when they made mistakes, because they were like, oh, we get to learn from that now. Your brain grew. So I think that's one of my favorite things that we expanded on with our technology this year.
So we were talking a little bit about the growth of teacher agency, right? I mean, that's the phrase, teacher agency and student agency, but it's that empowerment that maybe when we were all sent to our separate places, again, we kind of lost that power dynamic a little bit, and it gave people more of an egalitarian way to communicate and to learn, and then for you to educate. That's really interesting. Frank, talk a little bit. I'll assume at some point you moved on from the paper packets, right?
Oh yeah, very quickly. In fact, I was just thinking about what people were saying, like Brittany, you were talking about choice. And that's one thing, teachers, they use choice boards a lot. I mean, technology gives you that freedom. We had kids making videos, presentations, slideshows. So, like you said, Kevin, and I've always said that teachers sometimes just need permission to do those things. Like, it's okay. Yes, you get an observation. Yes, you get a whatever, but it's okay to do that. We're telling our kids to go out and try things and be wrong, like Stacy said, and fail. They have to see that and be okay. And obviously it happened a lot during the pandemic. You try stuff, it just doesn't work, and you got to be okay with it, and you got to come back to it. and see what's better. So there's that choice. There's the freedom of some kids want to, do something in a video. Some kids don't want to be seen on video. So that choice is there for them. And that's where technology gives you that freedom. I mean, the rise of the little Bitmoji this year was like ridiculous. We used it for virtual back to school night where you clicked on a teacher's Bitmoji and you went into their video conference about their class. And, we try to make it as much like you were in school. We had morning announcements. We had the flag salute. We had all those things. The principals did a great job with that. And then the teachers, as they started developing their creativity, they started, when we used G Suite. So they started saying, hey, there's these add-ins. This is what we can do with it, but these could make them a little better. We can now take polling. We can measure, learning, because that was a big question. I'm sure a lot of districts, how do we know they're learning? How do we know they're there? So we had to come up with ways of like even doing attendance. Like if they're turning their work in, you may not see them, but their work is getting completed and it's there. If you're missing so many assignments, then we need to take action. So it's that whole idea of, we don't want you to be online for 4 hours. We want to meet, we want to review, we want to give you work, we want to come back to it. So it's those things. And I think that's when teachers started to see that, and teachers are innately creative. They're like, ooh, I can do this, I can do that. Here's your choice. And then the kids started catching on and it just snowballed. It was really neat to watch.
And last year they weren't encumbered by any sort of state assessments, right? All of a sudden they just disappeared. Or this year.
Or this year, yeah. In fact, that was the one thing we did, is we had some tools in place that we could measure growth and find the gaps. And we were able to submit that data to the state. And fortunately enough, schools did it, and the state submitted it to the federal government. And they're like, yeah, you're good to go. We've got enough data on that.
Do you anticipate it going back, or do you have hopes that maybe those tools will continue to evolve?
In terms of the state assessment type things?
Yeah,
or
in moving that data back over to the state.
I think I'd like to see them evolve. I mean, as you know, things don't move as quickly as we'd like them to. I know in the fall we're going to have some sort of assessment to show what state we're in coming back to normal. But I think that there's a push now to show, hey, we don't need to take a snapshot of a kid for one day on a state assessment. We want to see a portfolio. We want to see the whole thing. We don't want to just go, here it is. That kid could have been sick or had a terrible day at home, and then they could have been a great student. It's just it's not a very accurate measure. I'd rather see something a little more holistic.
Yeah, and Kristen, are there tools that are that used to be in the remote learning world that go beyond just a standardized test sort of assessment, where you can do some formative assessment on students? And do you think that they could be applied in a real world, or not a real world, but an in-person environment like Frank's?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that we do have the tools available that we could look at alternative forms of assessment, especially, as this whole world has kind of transformed us really, and the way we assess students. I also think that, students, we still need to get that measure. So I know I'm a big proponent of, bringing those students in, having them show me, wait, what can you do? Still having that face-to-face assessment, because that's really a true measure of what a student can do. Because just like Frank said, that child might be sick. That child, maybe had a terrible, night the night before, didn't sleep well. We don't know their circumstances, but allowing those teachers to also give input to, I guess a standardized assessment based on what they see and in the everyday classroom and those everyday interactions. I think that still needs to be accounted for, seeing that academic growth. I mean, we see it every day in K-5. A student comes in, they start at a certain level. We see that huge level of growth. It may not show on that state assessment, but we see it, and we have those tools and measures that we can show. And honestly, we've been able to do that and take it just what we did in the brick and mortar classroom, where we're in front of those students every day, and we're able to do that.
Mm. Yeah, one of the phrases too over the years that I always heard about that was kind of always a theoretical or even an esoteric sort of aspect was the idea of a digital portfolio. There are lots of companies that were pushing the idea of them where you get, and even for younger grades. I think when you look at the acceleration of the use of technology tools, and I'll say the word TikTok, and the use of students using that and as a creative tool, shouldn't they be put into their digital portfolio as well, and used as a sort of assessment? I see lots of nods. I think I'm preaching to the choir, but Brittany, maybe you can talk a little bit about going forward, how to continue to, I don't know, create a digital portfolio tool that you can somehow take the results of and use as proof in the pudding that students are advancing versus that one day bubble test.
And there is, there's a lot of questions to be asked about really how we then define the bar of what is mastery. Because until we do that, and can define that bar, not only from an academic perspective, but a contributing to your community well perspective as we move forward, it's hard to decipher what mastery actually looks like. We have to decide that first. And I would love for someone to show me who is the standard kid that we're aligning to. I would like to know who that kid is, because then I would have a better idea of how to get my students to mastery when I know who is the standard. But in my opinion, there is no standard. Everybody is unique and individual, and as a community and as a greater community, I am seeing that everywhere. I'm seeing acceptance. I'm seeing the push to supporting our differences and moving forward in that way. And so I think that we not only need to create new tools to develop and decipher when a student has reached mastery in a standard skill set or in an objective within a standard, we have to understand what mastery actually looks like in application of what is opportunity for our students. But with that being said, there are strong tools out there that do that already. Many of our schools use the MAP assessment, which is directly aligned to our SAT and ACT structures and strategies. And we can actually see from a kindergarten level growth on that pathway. So if we were saying specifically our goal was for our students to do well on their path to college, say that's the goal. That's not my personal goal, but that's been a consistent goal that I've seen in education, right? So let's say that goal stays for a long time, right? I don't think that that's going to shift automatically. But if that is the goal, there are assessments in place that focus on growth towards how we can hit a certain level of mastery or certain target when we get to those ACTs and SATs that will set us up for college, right? And that's just for that one pathway. But the great thing about assessments like that is they don't just consider mastery, they consider growth. And so you can see where your student is on that pathway. And instead of us saying that for a student to do well, they master all of the standards which within a grade level set of standards, instead we maximize on their growth, that they're making a year of growth in each grade level. And I think that that's really a strategic and realistic way to move forward. Now, if I wanted to go idealistic, we'd be talking a lot of like hundreds of pathways, hundreds of different standards towards mastery, thousands. But if we want to talk strategically about one possible solution, it's about being able to show that level of growth and aiming for a target of 1 year's growth per grade level to be strategically set up for success to do well if college is where you want to go.
Well, look, micro-credentials and certifications is a whole other webinar. So we'll have to have Stride do another one in a couple of months. And we're actually, believe it or not, coming up to the end of our time. This has just been a great conversation, and you can just by the speed of which we've gotten to this point. But I do want to finish up by asking each of our educators just kind of a final game show question to think about what tool they are really glad they have now as a result of the past 18 months. And if there is, what tool can't wait to get rid of as soon as things can go back to normal? Maybe, and Stacy, as the teacher, you're probably the quickest witted among us. So maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I think I'm just going to piggyback off of the assessing that we were talking about, but talk more about tools that we use in our virtual classroom. So, I mean, I'm assessing my students every day. And my favorite tool that we use for that I personally use for that, is a website called GoFormative. It's amazing. The kids can make videos, they can record themselves. You can put videos in, all kinds of questions, turn PDFs into fill in the blanks. It's fantastic. And so I've really loved that with my students. You can grade them, like give them grades and feedbacks. But my favorite thing, and I was thinking about this while Brittany was talking about how every student is different, that I started this year, is adding a question at the end that says, what do you know about this topic that I didn't ask you about? And that has been my favorite question. I ask it every day now in every class, because I'm absolutely astounded every day by their answers. Of course, you get a few that are like, I don't know, but then you'll have one that maybe they missed the math problem. I don't even know what they did, but then they came over here to this question and they wrote me a whole paragraph that is absolutely phenomenal about what we've been talking about. And so I think that having such a range of students this year and opening up the way I assess them, not just did you get the correct answer, but the foundation of why do we do it this? Why do we do this? Why do you need this? Allowing them to just tell me what they know and assess them all individually in different ways, because they are individuals and they learn different ways and they express it in different ways. And that just happens to be my favorite online tool to use. There's lots of them, but that is something that has really rocked my world the last year in a good way. With having such a range of students, I don't really have anything I want to get rid of though.
No.
Give me all the tech. I'll find a way to use it. Fair
enough. I'll let you off the hook on that one. Kristen, how about you?
I was thinking the same thing. I thought, well, I don't really have anything that I would want to get rid of. I only want to build on my arsenal of, tools. But, anything that we do that engages student learning. So we have several tools that we've been using this year in the classroom, just really focusing on that student engagement. Just kind of piggybacking again off assessment and our discussion there with digital portfolios. We do use a digital portfolio for writing. And wow, has that been a game changer this year? Just seeing that progression in writing and the kids getting excited about posting their writing and presenting their writing in authors' chairs and things like that. I think the giving the kids the opportunity to participate just like we are today in clubs and other ways to just build on their social emotional learning as well, I think is also very important. So to say that there was one favorite, I guess it would have to be the way we communicate through video, whatever platform that may be. I think it's been a great tool. I think it's been a game changer in terms of being able to take, children from brick and mortar and get them into virtual learning this past year through COVID. I think it's been huge.
Great, thank you. And Frank.
So I kind of agree with both of you. I mean, looking at the tool set, the collaborative tool set. I mean, like I said, we're G Suite, so there's all that collaboration, and really utilizing that collaborative feedback aspect where the kids can share. Because I told the teachers, like, you know what? They don't have to wait for you to give the answer. If they post the question somewhere, one of their classmates will probably beat you to it, and you'll be like, great, they're teaching each other now. So I think that anything collaborative where it's not just one person, the teacher, being collaborative with all of them, it's everybody being collaborative with everybody. And I think that's huge, because then, I've seen them collaborate live, sharing a screen and giving control and things like that. I think that goes leaps and bounds, especially when you're in that virtual or hybrid environment, because like a lot of districts, we we eased our way back in. You know, we still had kids that stayed home. We had to figure out how to do, you know, synchronous blended learning. That was a challenge, especially it was harder to do that than all virtual, you know.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing I'd want to go away. I think it's more, if I had to pick one thing, maybe the document camera. Just because people lean on that thing and just put a pad of paper under it and like, okay, guys, that's good. You know,
Yeah.
there's a worksheet there and you're writing on it just like your kid would. But I know there's great uses for that, but I think some people haven't really gotten the idea of it. And document cameras are great.
Right.
We just need a little more PD on those.
Right. Right. a few more months. A few more months of getting
That kind of
together.
fell behind on the document camera.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of our educators for just a really inspiring conversation. I'm going to go back. I'm going to take some notes because there was a lot of tools that I think are going to stick around. And I think that the behaviors are going to remain, hopefully, at least it seems, at least in your schools and districts. Usually when I had these webinars, I want to get off and move to wherever you guys are teaching. So, but you know, finishing up, Brittany, any last thoughts that you have on the conversation we just had and how Stride can work with these sort of circumstances?
Absolutely. One of the big takeaways for me, and something that we've really been focusing on, is asking the people who are using the tools what they need, and also making sure that the training that we create is training by teachers for teachers, because we need to make sure that we are homing in on the correct perspectives. We're ensuring that we're using our most precious stakeholders to move all students forward. And so asking our teachers what they need and focusing all of our work in the department that I work in around supporting our teachers so they can do their best work every day is something that we have been taking very seriously and moving forward. And I am excited to name Stacy and Kristen. For example, we are revising the OLS and OMHS knowledge base to make sure that it is searchable so that folks can go in, find exactly what they need within seconds and get out of there and be able to be with their students. So strategizing training based on exactly what our teachers are saying they need to be able to move students forward and doing exactly that has been something that I want to make sure that we take into everything that we do as we move forward, so that we're truly moving our most precious stakeholders, our students, forward by taking very good care of also precious stakeholders, our teachers. So that is something, Kristen and Stacy in the room, a promise I'm making to you, but also something that we are working very hard on to do well. And that's done by having close relationships with our teachers, including them every step of the way. For example, Neuro was a teacher-built structure. And now we have a program like Zoom that has teacher-specific tools that are being updated every day from the perspective of the teacher to make their teaching environment more efficient, effective, and to where students are walking away feeling like they're learning something in every lesson and that they've been connected with their teacher. So we're working really hard to make sure that we start with our teachers first, creating for our teachers so that they have what they need to move every learner forward.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the work at Stride. I mean, all the industry leaders that I've spoken to, I mean, everybody really stepped up over the past 18 months and really provided support to districts in, and I hate the phrase now, but unprecedented ways, right? I mean, this is a whole new ballgame, and I think we'll continue to reap the benefits of all of this, you know, embroilment that we've been in, and thanks to you for your insights that hopefully our audience can take with them. I'd like to remind the audience that you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thank you for coming and attending the event and participating, and have a great day.